Behind the Author interview with Jamie Nodder and Maddie Grant. I'm really excited for today's conversation and thrilled that you guys took the time to be here with us today. It's going to be a fantastic discussion. We're going to talk about their brand new book, When Millennials Take Over, which I will show you right here. Look at this beautiful cover. I love it. So we're going to talk about the book and then talk about their overall strategy and how that impacted every step of their publishing journey. And of course, we'll leave time to share some success tips and a lot of things that you can apply to your own book and brand, so there'll be a lot of value and laughs and a good time from this call today. So first I want to give a quick introduction of Maddie and Jamie, and then we'll dive right in. As I mentioned, they're the authors of the brand new book, When Millennials Take Over, Preparing for the Ridiculously Optimistic Future of Business. Their first book was Humanize, which was published by Q, a traditional publisher. And they are the co-founders of Culture That Works, a consulting and strategy firm that's dedicated to helping organizations and companies create awesome cultures, retain top talent, and attract the best customers. And you'll hear about how Culture That Works developed and how that was tied into the strategy. They have amazing combined superpowers over 40 years of experience. Jamie has expertise on the conflict resolution and generation side of things, and Maddie comes with a brilliant mind for digital strategy, among other things. So you will hear a lot more about their expertise and the amazing work that they're doing. So welcome, guys.
Thank you so much.
Really glad to have you. So. Yeah, Maddie, do you want to fill in the picture a little bit about your background? And I'd love to start for you guys to briefly talk about the book, and then we'll dive into the background behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, I have a background in digital strategy and social media, and Jamie's background is in management consulting, generational diversity, and conflict resolution. And over the past several years, we've done a lot of speaking and writing together about really how social media was starting to change how we work, not just how we market and communicate with our customers.
Indeed.
Yeah, so topics like transparency, collaboration, experimentation, authenticity, all of these kinds of things were bubbling up more and more. And in 2011, we wrote our first book called Humanize, which basically spelled out in lots of very specific ways some of these changes around social media, but specifically how they were changing management. So fast forward to 3 years later, and we realize that there's actually a much bigger catalyst which is going to really make these changes happen even faster. And that, of course, is the millennial generation entering management positions. So the millennials are no longer just kids these days. They are actually managers now. They're in their early 30s. So that is the impetus behind the new book, When Millennials Take Over. And I'll let Jamie share a little bit about what's in that book.
Sure. So for that, when we started writing that book, we actually did research both with millennials. So and part of the book we do explain sort of who the millennials are and what are the forces that shaped them. But we actually did interviews with about 100. Actually close to 200 different millennials who are in the workforce right now about their approach. And as Maddie said, these are not all entry-level folks. They've been around, they have experience, and they have a decidedly different approach to leadership and management. And then we combined that research with an exploration of organizations that have absurdly strong cultures. So organizations that where the people who work there say things like, "I literally can't imagine working somewhere else," or "I remember, what it was like when I used to work at XYZ. I'm never going back to that again."
Which is it's a profound statement today to have someone say that they can't imagine working anywhere else. That's not the norm, certainly.
No. These places have that kind of engagement, employee engagement, that everyone sort of says they want, and these folks sort of do it. And so we looked at the overlap of these really strong cultures on the one hand, and where the millennials, where their attention was going, right, where their vision is going, because we really think that the whole point mean, I'm sort of giving it away now. The millennials don't actually take over. Okay, it's like no one generation ever runs things, but they are, as we said in the book, they're sort of our secret decoder ring. Like they are showing us where the future is headed. And so in the book, we found this overlap between the millennial approach and these really strong cultures, and that's out of that where we developed the 4 capacities that we write about, and those are digital, clear, fluid, and fast. And again, so we have a chapter on each of those. We talk about what it means, why it matters to the millennials, and then for each one of them, we have a case study that really digs into, okay, what does this look like in the real world? Because we wanted to not give people that excuse of, oh, well, I'm not Zappos, so I can't do this. We
Right.
get real organizations that don't have a ton of resources that are doing it. And then we get pretty concrete about, okay, so if you're going to do it, here's where you need to focus. So.
And you guys uncovered some really fascinating stories, examples, and case studies as a part of talking to a number of organizations across industries.
Yeah, I love, like, for the case studies that we have a chapter on digital, which we put first because we assumed that everyone would think digital would come first because we're talking about millennials and they're always on their screens, right? But I love that our case study for digital is actually a small nonprofit. It's the American Society for Surgery of the Hand, and although they're only 20 staff and they are a membership organization, they do they invest a lot in technology and a lot in giving employees what they need. But as we say in that chapter, the key piece about digital is actually embracing the mindset. So they put their employees first, they put their customers, their members first as they design things, and they do it in ways that, when I tell other organizations about this, when we speak, it's like they don't believe that a group this small could do what they do. But they're able to, and it's just by embracing these different ideas.
Which is, yeah, fantastic, and we'll circle back to that in a bit. But finding, incorporating the original research with millennials, as well as finding those case studies that really illustrated the points that you wanted to make in terms of how accessible and relevant the capacity you talk about in the book. That was a strategic decision and not just as a haphazard one. So congratulations on the launch of the book. It's been a wild and furious journey, and we'll talk about the timing, the publishing pathway, and all of those things. But as many of you know who received an invitation, they had a chance to debut the book with a book reading at South by Southwest, and attended the Nonprofit Technology Conference, ASAE's Great Ideas Conference. So there's been among a few, with many other interviews and activities surrounding the launch. So it's, Maddie, you alluded to this, but a year ago, we all first started talking about working together and what the success of Humanize and how things were going for you in your current stage, and that you knew that this second book needed to be a different book. So I'd love, Maddie, if you want to jump in and talk about how When Millennials Take Over is a different book than Humanize, beside the obvious title and topic, how it's different, and how your overall business strategy impacted the direction for the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So Humanize, like you mentioned, it was critically acclaimed. I mean, we got some very, very good reviews and very interesting comments and lots of interest in the book, but it was kind of a deep intellectual tome. It was basically the book we had to write. We had to get it out. We had to get all these ideas on paper. It was a lot of theory, a lot of analysis of conversations going on in our field.
And it's a great book, by the way. It's an important
thank you. But what we did realize was it was a little bit too heady for the goal of bringing us more consulting business, which ultimately is what we needed. So we very, very specifically and proactively decided that the second book would be designed to be shorter. It would be more easily accessible. It would be maybe more quotable in that kind of way, more marketable, because these ideas were even more important than they were 3 years ago. So, and we knew that the work was important. But in order to do the good work that is related to this change, these changes happening in business, we needed to get the book out there beyond our circle of friends and social media people. So, that was a big impetus for the concept behind the book as a marketing vehicle from day one, I think.
And, one of the things that was so inspiring to me, an important factor, with all the clients I work with, but, you guys have such a powerful vision and motivation to transform the conversation around company culture and what that looks like and what it's possible, these remarkable cultures that you saw as, part of your research and case studies, that these can actually happen and be scalable, and, budgets and bureaucracy and things like that are not an excuse for not being able to create cultures like this. And, Maddie, you alluded to the fact that you guys have a really powerful, network that are fans and supporters of the first book, and in the association space, you guys are all but celebrities and have a great network. And yet we knew that this book, we wanted to open doors to a much wider conversation and to reach new industries and organizations that you didn't have relationships with.
Yeah, and the thing I would add to that too is that what we realized after writing Humanize is that there was no defined problem that companies would pay for us to come and fix. So nobody goes out and says, I need somebody to humanize my organization, even though they really get and they really agree with the concept in the book. It just wasn't tied to, an actual business problem that we could then come in and help solve. So that was another piece of it. And then, like you said, we just wanted to be able to move that conversation beyond our nonprofit association circles into different markets, because these issues are so universal to all of the business world.
Absolutely, yes, and they are relevant across industries and organizations of 5 to 5,000. Jamie, what would you add in terms of the your approach to When Millennials Take Over and how this book has been different for you?
Well, I mean, I think Maddie hit it pretty well, but and this, so like I'm a content guy. I've been blogging forever. I sort of wrote a lot of the first draft of Humanize, and it's kind of hard for me to realize that being right isn't enough. You know what I mean? Like,
I'll quote you. That's the quote from today's.
I would love to just be able to write, and because we got that feedback from people that said, this is really important stuff with Humanize. You guys are onto something really big, and we sort of knew this a little bit, or we guessed, but people said you're a little ahead of your time with Humanize. But the point is, like, even when we got out there and started talking about it, like Maddie said, no one is up at night worrying about humanizing their organizations. And I look at other material that's out there that has sort of a bigger footprint, and it's not any righter or better than what we're putting out there.
Or gooder.
So like it's like it was really clear that in addition to developing insights and writing about important stuff, which is, like Maddie said, we have to do that. Like, that's what we do, is we write that stuff. But in order to have that writing to have an impact, we had to write a different book than we did with Humanize. We had to write something that was crafted to fit into that bigger platform. And that's, not my expertise, quite frankly, so that's why we needed help. But I find it actually to be just as satisfying a writing experience, in my opinion, doing that. That's just sort of an additional challenge that gets layered on to the writing of it, rather than it being like, oh, well, and I also have to do this part. I thought they were, integrated.
Absolutely. There's the concept, and it's one that I'm not a big fan of, but there's the concept of the big business card, and that you need a book to align with your overall business strategy and goals. And one of the things that I dislike about that concept is because it devalues the power and the impact that a book alone, inside an organization, say a team leader, a VP, an executive inside an organization can pick up your book, have a conversation with their division or their team, and significant transformation can take place many times with an author never knowing that that's happening, or at least until much later or after the fact. And there's a big distinction between writing that book that is aligned, that's purposeful, that's meaningful, that's in support of your goals to grow the consulting business, to elevate your platform as speakers and change agents that are shifting the conversation around culture, to grow your income. All those things are good, but there's that distinction between creating a book that does those things and then just creating a book for the sake of having business development conversations and not honoring the process itself. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. So I alluded to, I mentioned growing your speaking platform, growing your consulting. Let's talk a bit more about the business strategy, because, when we started working together, just working on the book alone would have been a pretty intensive endeavor, and yet, oh no, we worked on a lot more than that. New website, new company, a lot around the speaking. So aside from the fact that it's been very intense and overwhelming, Maddie, what has that been like for you in terms of shifting what's possible from a consulting perspective and looking at how your brand is showing up in the market?
Well, it's interesting because I think it was very opportune that it just happened to be a situation where we were launching a new company together at the same time. So it was, I'm a big picture person. I'm a consultant. This is what I do for other people in a way. So being able to look at our whole system, our writing, our blogs, our existing clients from our current separate consulting businesses, how to put that together into our new consulting firm, how to brand ourselves and create that kind of messaging around the company as well as around the book. All of that, I think, was maybe easier in a weird way because we could look at it all together and really consider that forward direction and kind of use the book as a little pointer arrow in the distance to keep us moving forward. So, I just think it was an opportunity to look at everything and how everything connected to everything else, including, of course, the websites and things like that. So there's the visible stuff, there's the writing, which is also visible in a different way, and then there's just the strategizing around business opportunities and platform and audience and business models and all of that kind of stuff. So, and it's of course an ongoing process. It's not even remotely ended yet. We're just at the beginning of it. But I really thought it was exciting to look at it all together because you can get stuck in the weeds of any one of those pieces.
Well, and there's two really powerful things we can extract from that. Number one, by looking at it as an integrated whole, it helped us and really you guys with having conversations with me, but you guys ultimately pulling out your checkbook and investing your time to know where to invest your time, money, and energy so that you're that you would achieve, your strategic goals as opposed to chasing shiny objects that weren't aligned with the overall business strategy or what we were wanting to accomplish on the speaking front or the media front, just in service to the book launch alone in isolation. And then the second thing I would say that is really powerful for the audience listening is that you guys had your own separate brands. Jamie, you have jamienotter.com. Maddie, you have socialfish.com. And within your existing relationships, everyone knew where to find you. They, know, like, and trust factor is there, and they were, hired you before and ready to hire you now. But as we were expanding into new markets, trying to reach new companies, having the collective brand of Culture That Works really just helps tell a cohesive story in a way that opens doors more quickly than things were previously structured.
Yeah,
Jamie,
for sure.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Maddie.
I just want to mention one thing about that is that that part was really hard for us at the very beginning, is trying to figure out our story. So how to explain to the people who already knew us in our two separate instances, even though we have done a lot of speaking and writing and presenting and all kinds of stuff together before, how to explain that story of us coming together with this new venture was really difficult because we had such an existing audience. So I think we needed that external voice to help us figure out how to tell that story, even just before the book was even conceived, really.
No, I would add also, I mean, we experienced with Humanize, we were obviously the co-authors of Humanize, but there is no Humanize LLC, like there wasn't, we still had these separate things, and people knew us as authors of the book, but even if they didn't articulate it, that underlying confusion they have of, wait a minute, do you work together? What do you do? Wait, does she only do that? And you did, like, that kind of confusion was there, even if we did a good job of writing the introductions so that it was clearer. And like Maddie said, we spent a lot of time really thinking, okay, who are we together? And she pointed, it was really kind of luck that it happened, and when it did, that we had the opportunity to really create the company together. But I mean,
well, and I would say too, to give you guys some credit. I mean, you have very thoughtful conversations, and you're proactive about looking at next steps. And when we, had our initial conversations, you guys have been in the space long enough to know that, having a big launch and, a bestseller for a day, week, or even, 3 months is not enough to make a lasting impact. And it really comes down to that strategy for all aspects of your thought leader platform. So you guys had done a lot of that thinking, prior to some diving in and starting our work together. And certainly that planted the seeds for a culture that works and a lot of the other things that we worked on.
I'll just add one more thing, because the book I'm reading right now, which I shouldn't even be plugging because I didn't write it, is The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and that idea in lean manufacturing and is eliminating effort that doesn't create value, right? And like if it doesn't create value, then don't do it, and learn iteratively what creates value and what doesn't. And that process of actually aligning the book with the new company and getting clarity on our story and why we're together, that allowed us, I think, to write the book in a way that so that the effort was leading to that value creation work, as opposed to the, gee, that was an interesting blog post, but it doesn't help us. You know what I mean? So right. It was important in being more efficient ultimately in what we're doing.
Cool. So yeah, I want to shift gears and talk about publishing platform and decisions we made surround how to publish this book. I want to remind the audience though, feel free to submit questions as they're coming up. We're going to definitely have time for Q&A at the end, and so don't feel like you have to wait there. Click on that Q&A button on your screen and submit a question. Okay, so as I mentioned in the introduction, you guys had a traditional publisher for your first book. You publishing, and right away we had. Can you guys hear an echo?
It's a little cutting out a little bit.
Maddie, try muting.
Sorry, guys. Stand by for technical difficulties.
I can't hear anything if I mute.
Okay. Now, actually, that seems good. So, yeah. So as I mentioned, one of the first conversations that we had was about what is the best pathway for you guys strategy to get the message out. In other words, was it going back to Q, writing a book proposal, doing another traditional publisher, was it self-publishing, and eventually we completed on Idea Press and that self-publishing pathway. Maddie, do you want to jump in and talk about what that was like? The fill in as well. Hopefully, and hopefully the echo will go away.
Sure. So so we were familiar with Q. We'd done Humanize through our traditional publisher, and let's say the limitations of that process. And I will never say anything really bad about traditional publishing because I don't think we could have done this second book without having the experience of the first book. So I think that's actually very important just to mention. Important. But it was almost serendipitous that I happened to know Rohit Bhargava, who is the publisher, Idea Press, and I connected with him almost randomly, and that's when he told me about his idea to start, or that he had started this new publishing company. And he explained the business model around it, which is basically that he has a group of experts in all the different pieces of publishing. So, an indexer, a proofreader, cover designers, and obviously the printer, all the different pieces, copy editors, all of that, the different pieces involved. And the author can choose the services that they need based on what they need. And of course, if they have their own people for some of it, they use their own people. And we share the cost. So it's a very different kind of model than the traditional publishing model. But for us, having basically not had any marketing support and knowing that this book had to be marketable, I mean, that was the whole entire purpose of the book and the way we wrote it, is the marketing was like paramount. So it was a very, very attractive way to think about it. And I remember, Elizabeth, you said, you mentioned Greenleaf Publishing as another kind of small independent publisher who had a basically similar model. So we did look at a few options and eventually, chose to go with Idea Press, and it was experimental. I mean, we had no idea how it was going to work. He directly said, we're all in this together, we're all learning together. I'm going to test out a bunch of stuff on my own books and, tell you what happens. And you can choose, to test the same kinds of things on your book, but I don't know, how things are necessarily going to go. And I think we were just in the right frame of mind to want to do some of that experimentation. Again, knowing that the kind of traditional way was not going to be the right way for us, because unless you have hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy your way onto a bestseller list, right? Then
conversation for another time. Yes.
Yeah, perhaps not such the best way to go. So for us, we don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. Therefore, we were willing to be a little bit more experimental. And we'll talk more about the specifics, but so far so good. We're very, very happy with how things are going.
Yeah, you brought out two really important pieces. First of all, hopefully, can someone who's listening type in a question to see if you're hearing an echo? Hopefully, it's not too bad, but I'll just carry on. So, the many of you who have heard me say this before, but the publishing space, it literally is the Wild West of publishing. You have, just on NPR this morning, HarperCollins is in a fight with Amazon again. Last year, Hachette was in a fight with Amazon. You have traditional publishing models that are crumbling and simultaneously evolving, and you have more opportunities than ever to get your message and book out there, and new self-publishing options that are popping up every day. So to be willing to have the attitude and approach of experimentation, to say we're willing to try something new because we know, based on what we want strategically, that the old way is not going to be the best fit for us, our audience, and our business model, is a really important attitude to have in this space of rapid evolution and uncertainty, and where things that worked 6 months ago aren't working anymore. And Maddie, as Maddie said, Rohit Bhargava, who was a former SVP at Ogilvy Digital, brilliant marketing mind, I've worked with him actually on his own books, Likeonomics, Personality Not Included, and a number of others. And Rohit is of the type of mind to see what's possible, to a visionary in terms of marketing and how that applies to publishing. And so I would say for you guys, this has been such an, interesting partnership in the sense that it is a partnership. Someone like Rohit is actually looking to collaborate and partner with his authors, as opposed to, I'm trying to get, a lot of other publishers having that pressure to get X number of books out per year, only having a certain amount of time to spend with authors. So there's a lot of perks there, in addition to being able to retain your intellectual property rights and have more control.
Well, I'll add that piece about control to me was the most interesting part of our partnership with him, or at least from my experience working with a traditional publisher. I mean, he designed this, I think, to create a place where the authors get more control, which works particularly for business books, right? It's like you said, it's not about a volume, like I need to get 10,000 books out every year as a publisher, I'm not successful. It's what do I need to do in order to make this particular niche more successful? And in that case, you got to have more control. We can sell directly to our corporate clients that want to buy books from us. We couldn't do that before because the Q's model wouldn't support it. And that's actually not a criticism of Q. Their model wouldn't support it, right? Like I don't blame them for not customizing it for all their authors. They would never stay on top of things. But this enables us to do what we want to do. It doesn't take all the risk out. It doesn't solve all the problems. It doesn't make the whole endeavor any easier. It's still hard work to get the book to be successful, but we just have so much more opportunity to do stuff, whereas we only discovered in the old process after we were into it, oh, well, it's actually a conflict of interest if I want to sell books direct, so I got to go through here, and then then it sort of doesn't work. But you learn that the hard way. But I give credit to him and making our model very transparent. He doesn't hide anything. It's almost like he read our book before he published it.
I bet he did.
He believes in these ideas that I think make sense in today's economy. So.
Well, and yeah, you alluded to something, and there's so many directions we could go there, but you alluded to something really important, Jamie. And many of the things that we planned, both from a marketing and launch perspective for you guys, we're still in the very early stages. The book just came out less than a month ago, and the fruits of a lot of these marketing efforts and launch efforts won't be realized, right away, and will show up 6 months, down the road, 12 months down the road. But as you were saying, having that control and flexibility with clients, that ties into offers that you can make for discounted keynotes with books at a certain price, or for certain organizations and groups where you have a great relationship. There's flexibility instead of having a set price that you have to charge every single time across the board. Depending on whether 25 books or 400 books are sold, and that's not a small point. So just wanted to shine a light on that. So, yeah. So another thing that's been really interesting and different about you guys partnering with Idea Press is that a year ago we were just to working on the description, so we could get the concept right, and working on potential titles, and basically a year later, we have a finished book. And again, I'm going to show this cover because it's one of the best covers that I've seen in a while. So it's really, Face Out Design was the design firm for this. That was a pretty compressed, intense schedule, where we were, not only working on, you guys were working on the manuscript, doing the research, writing, but we were also working on websites and all of those things. So can you talk about how this process has been different, both in terms of, how the timeline was laid out, how quick it was? These were all conscious choices that we made, but it is definitely different than the traditional process.
I'll take this one. So yeah, it's different. I think it was equally short. So the first time round was very short as well. I think in both cases we had 6 months. But the first time around, it was very mechanical, which of course is not our thing, in the sense that we had to submit 25% of the book every 6 weeks, basically. And therefore, the book proposal had our entire outline spelled out, and then we couldn't change it. We had to stick to that outline, and that's what they were expecting every few weeks, which was actually fine for getting the book written and created. And then, of course, after the first couple of segments or quarters of the book are submitted, then you start adding the revisions to those at the same time as you're writing. You're continuing to write the rest of the book. So that part was arduous the first time round. But this time, because we knew that was one way to do the writing, and we'd had the experience of writing together as well, which of course we had to learn the best way to write together. And I will share an anecdote about that, which is that Jamie is a morning person and I'm a night person, so it's basically like outsourcing to India, because I would basically take the book starting at 9 p.m., and spend a few hours writing, and then by the time Jamie woke up at 5:30 or 6, he'd have a whole bunch of edits and other stuff to work on. So anyway, so we had that experience of knowing how to work together to write the book. But
which I'll say from an outside perspective, I mean, that's huge, and we may get some questions about what it's like to write a book with another person. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you guys have written a book together before and have collaborated to such a great extent is not insignificant.
Yeah, so that was the good part, is we were prepared in that respect. We also did have a very basic outline that we shared with you, Elizabeth, for the second book. But I think what's different is that at every moment we were strategizing what case studies would be the most helpful based on our overall business goals and strategies, not just based on the good stories and what we wanted in the book. So having those two layers, having somebody who cared about whether this case study would be more effective in the future for us, as opposed to just a good story, because we found lots and lots of good stories. I mean, that's part of the beauty of this topic, and why we're so optimistic, which is the subtitle of the book, is that there's a lot of great stuff going on in the world to write about. But having that, extra questioning about why this one versus that one, this case study versus another, nonprofit versus for-profit, big versus small, do we have a good spread? All of that kind of stuff, as we were writing the book, was really, really helpful.
And I'll add, even to the point of as we were writing the book and editing the book, figuring out which lines to bold, because we knew that it needed to be skimmable at one level, so that people could get the key concepts quickly and then go back and sort of read through. That thinking was sparked by the fact that we were constantly thinking about the market and about the reader as we were writing, as opposed to just thinking about what matters to us, which frankly is how I usually write. So that was infused throughout the whole, even through the beginning. I swear we wrote the book we could put the book out in less than a year. We spent 6 months on the one-page description.
We did. Right? How many rounds? I mean,
exactly. We spent, we went through 400 titles before coming back to the one we started with. But that piece of it was so important in guiding everything else along the way in a way that we sort of didn't realize the first time around as we were doing it. So.
Yeah, and just to clarify for the audience, in starting with that description, the goal was really to make sure that the concept made sense, that it was relevant, that it was saleable, and as both Maddie and Jamie alluded to really bake the marketing into the process from the very beginning, because when you have a fantastic book that's relevant, that's accessible, that's easy to read, and feels compelling, it makes your marketing efforts a lot easier. And so that was certainly a part of the process. So No, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that about the description. I think this was really helpful from the very beginning and continues to be, is the way that you helped us actually verbalize what's in it for the reader, or potentially the market, the customer, our customer, as opposed to us describing the general benefit, sort of what we do, as opposed to what's in it for the reader. And that kind of, it's actually wordsmithing is really what it is, but it makes a huge difference, and it's hard to do. I mean, I look at some of the stuff I read and I'm like, oh, Liz will hate this. It doesn't have enough emotion in it, and like things like that, like where you just really think about how to really draw the reader in, but not just on an emotional level, but also because you want them to see what they're going to get out of it. That's the kind of thinking that we don't really have naturally.
Well, and I would say, that type of thing, the bar has been raised. With the publishing space being so crowded, and thousands of titles on any given topic, authors who want, again, we're talking today about not just publishing a successful book that sells copies, but really how to position the book and brand for long-term impact. These types of questions are really important, because this book retails at $24.95. I think it's close to $19 on Amazon right now, and the Kindle book is $7.99. Sure, people think about spending a few dollars, but the greatest competition that authors have is really a reader's time, and whether they perceive the book to be relevant, immediately useful, and accessible. So perhaps painful process, as we went through the rounds of the description, which was really refining and shaping the concept. But I think, as you guys said, it really set you up really well to be quick with the writing process and for it to just flow. And so just a reminder to everyone, first of all, thanks for letting me know that the echo is gone. I appreciate those comments. And please submit some questions that you have. We're going to talk about endorsements and a few other things, and we'll field those questions. So Jamie, you were talking about all the potential stories and case studies that could be included in the book, and how we all talked about which ones were not only just good stories, but relevant in terms of strategy and the overall business model. And that's a similar conversation that we had related to endorsements, and we spent a lot of time there looking at the types of leaders, influencers, voices that we wanted to have as a representation of support for the book, but also in terms of positioning you guys to reach new markets. Jamie, you want to hop in and talk about what the endorsement process was like for you for this go-round?
Well, I remember with Humanize, again, it's our first book. We were thrilled when anyone wanted to say something nice about the book, and before it came out, we got friends these are smart people we really respect, and they're like, wow, this book is great, and however they wrote it, and we were so excited, and we got 25 of these endorsements, which we put on, and I'm still thrilled about that. You want to write something that means something to people. But then after publishing a book, I became a much more savvy reader of business books. Mm-hmm. And you sort of look at them, and you look at how they're packaged, and you look at what information is on them, and suddenly I'm like, wow, it matters that Dan Pink said he liked that book. And I remember we wrote Dan Pink for Humanize, and he's like, I'm too busy, and I didn't have time. But we hadn't, I hadn't sort of circled the wagons and said, okay, who can we get? What level can we reach to based on who we know, and that's the decision you need to make first, not who's going to write the best content. And so it was much more fun for me, and honestly, you pulled all the strings to get us our best ones. But to be able to have a really solid mix of, okay, here's someone who writes books like you that says it's good, and then here are some CEOs that people, they won't necessarily know their name unless they're in that particular industry, but they can see that that organization has substance. Like that's better than a smaller one. And then actually seeking out academics to have that satisfied. It's easier for us to find academics. We hang around them enough that we would have no problem finding them. But it was like, okay, let's get someone who's not only going to be representing the academic side, but says something in a way that's not wholly academic, so that it crosses. Like it just became a much more sophisticated effort. I think it's going to be paying off. We certainly got feedback when we put it out. When we started publicizing these praise quotes, it raised a lot of eyebrows with friends of ours who were like, "Wow, Dan Pink, that's serious." So,
well, yeah, you alluded to something that's really important that I found from experience have found that's just really valuable in terms, again, of positioning the book from a strategy standpoint, is to look at the mix of what's possible. Like out of all the potential academics and professors that you can include, out of all the industry leaders and executives or heads of associations or industry groups, and then also your author, speaker, blogger categories, who are the most relevant names, and then collectively, what's that mix? It's like, cooking, it's that combination of ingredients that makes for a really strong story and message about how this book is being received across industries with organizations of different sizes and with different types of authors. Having Dan Pink on the one hand, Adam Grant on the other hand, along with Charlene Lee in the mix and many others, it really paints a diverse picture of the endorsement and support for the book, as well as the organizations that might like it based on, being a follower of Dan, Charlene, or Adam. Maddie, do you want to add anything to that before we segue to talking about launches, asking for the sale, good things like that?
No, I don't think I have anything more on that. I mean, just to reiterate that mix is really important, and I think we thought about the mix a bit the first time around, but not in that, again, that strategic way that was beyond just the book.
Yes, and so much of what we're highlighting today is that insight and perspective that comes, after going through a process and completing it once and going through the process again for the second time. So, let's talk about launch and marketing and asking for the sales. So, as I mentioned before, we've had quite a compressed timeline, and it's like, the car going at 90 miles an hour with, wheels maybe coming off slightly as we're making turns, getting ready for the marketing of this book. How has the marketing process, the preparation and then the execution of it, at least so far, again, we know it's early, how has that been different for you this time in terms of thinking about the marketing strategies, both for like book sales and then also for the long-term strategy?
So I'll just speak to the speaking platform piece of it, and then Jamie, maybe you want to talk about the book sales part. I'm bad at math, so. But I think just on the speaking part, we're lucky in that we have a pretty good platform. We speak at a lot of association conferences. It is within a certain niche industry, but that niche industry has fingers in lots of verticals. So from that standpoint, just being able to go back to people we've spoken to before, or conferences we've spoken for before, being able to say, you liked Humanize, here's our new book, being able to kind of build on our existing platform to reach a bigger, wider tranche of conferences has been really, really exciting. And of course, we've tried to get into South by Southwest several years and never got in, and this time we did, and it was the perfect timing to have the book launch be there. It was part of their book reading track, and they had a bookstore. I mean, it was like serendipity. It was great. So from that standpoint, I feel like we're jumping off the ledge off a much higher and better cliff than our little hill from last time.
Well, and you made reference to something that I think it's really important to um, make explicit, is that, in publishing, well, Janet and I, who used to run Book Breakthrough together, we talk about why you, why now, why this book, and we've talked a lot about why you and why this book was the right book for now, and the why now. I mean, it's just really beautiful to see how this book, converges so nicely with the major shifts in the market, and when that timing is right, and you're writing a book that speaks to the zeitgeist and to not a trends book, but is in sync with the changes that are coming, it can create so much natural momentum and opportunities with greater ease, as opposed to feeling like you're pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yeah, no, I would add on the launch, for the launch piece, which in case anyone out there hasn't written a book and is going to head to the launch, it's exhausting.
Yes.
But Maddie made reference to the fact that what was really different, I think, with this book is that we started so much earlier in mapping out exactly who we're going to contact, who, and in this, you learn in the speaking world, for some reason the conferences want to book their speakers like 10 months ahead of time. So you have to start early. But with Human Eyes, we sort of wrote the book and said, okay, let's speak about it. And that worked, and we had a nice sort of year of speaking about the book. But what was interesting to me is, we would push these people that we had spoken to before, and I would actually get a little discouraged, as you know, that oh, I got no response, nobody likes me, right? Like they're not all hiring us right away. But some of them, then we did the actual launch events, and we had 3 conferences within a 10-day period where we spoke. And then I followed up with some of those same people, and literally one guy's like, oh, my boss just came in and was talking about you because he or she had seen me at the Great Ideas Conference. Like, wow, like, this is what it takes. It's this sort of multiple iteration to get the snowball really rolling. And you have to, for me, I have to sort of remind myself that you're going to do a bunch of stuff that falls flat or seemingly falls flat as you're putting it out there. You're going to launch that day, and you're not going to get 10,000 people to buy the book that day. And it's like, this feels like I'm not making progress, but it's really like compound interest. And so you got to do the work of earning only $1 a day for and then $1.10 and then $1.20 if you want to be earning the $50, $100 and $200 a day later on. So and that requires starting earlier, and that requires being very disciplined, obviously, about making.
Well, and you make a great point, Jamie. As our mutual friend Les McEwen, author of Predictable Success and The Synergist, likes to say, it's all about consistency and ubiquity. And some opportunities will come through immediately because the time's right. The time's right for that organization or in the market, or they just like, Jamie, the invitation that you just got with an organization that had a cancellation for a keynote, and all of a sudden you're invited because, as opposed to, a year and a half or 2 years out. So there are those serendipitous opportunities, and then there are those daily activities that don't feel like you're making any progress or that anything has happened until 6 months later you hear that feedback of, oh, I've seen your book 4 times, after the past 6 months. And I would say, just from experience and working with clients across a lot of different industries and different stages, and then marketing even my own book, that's one of the hardest parts of this journey, to stay connected to your vision and the change that you want to create in your industry, even when you're not getting that feedback or not getting it to the degree that you need it to feel like you have, have some extra oomph, behind you when it feels like you want to just sit down and quit.
Well, and back to the earlier conversation about the control we have over the process, that's enabled us to really be able to pivot and be agile in what we're offering. We designed some bulk offers specifically for the corporate audience because we want to get in there, but our immediate audience that we were talking to was associations. They don't want that same offer. But I could basically take the same structure and tweak it a little bit and say, all right, hire me to speak. You get these many books for this price. Like, again, wouldn't have been able to do that before, but having the ability to make those decisions means we're getting people to say yes and quickly buy a couple hundred books, which we just couldn't do before. And so that's sort of another lesson around the launch is you can go in with your plan, but if you're not willing to be able to respond to the immediate feedback you get from the market, you're going to be following the wrong plan for 6 months. So
sage advice. And we even had adjustments to the timing and the pricing of the launch of the Kindle version of the book, based on some great intel and testing that Rohit had done on his end with some other books under Idea Press. And that can be jarring to have to change strategies in midfield.
You could change your strategy maybe every other day, for instance.
Yes, and that's just part of the
which I think we might
publishing.
Have done.
And you said it well, Jamie. Yeah, being willing to hear and listen to that feedback, and then pivot in real time. And yes, you're modeling the principles that that you're teaching. You're teaching in the book and asking organizations to take. So. Let's just wrap with two quick topics. I'd love to hear your advice on asking for the sale and what you've learned about being bolder about just asking groups and individuals to purchase the book and support you, and then we'll wrap up with the final question.
Is that one for me first?
Yes.
I think asking for the sale is always hard, I think, for all of us. And believing in our own work is really not enough. You actually have to just ask. And I think the big lesson, too, is that it's okay to ask more than once. And having that reminder to go back to your list of emails, to go back and check who responded, to go back and look at who said yes but didn't actually, do the blog post they said they were going to do, and check in with them, and just to keep going back. And most people, everybody knows what your email inbox looks like. If stuff falls out of yours, then it falls out of everybody else's too. And it's not spam really to be kind of reconnecting with people multiple times within reason, obviously. But I think just not being afraid to do that. And again, like you mentioned earlier, Liz, if the timing, maybe the timing's not super appropriate the first time you send the email, but 2 weeks later you send your second email and they're like, oh, yeah, I totally intended to do that. So, and you would have missed that. It would have been gone completely from their minds if you hadn't come back to them. So that's something, it seems so obvious, but, I hadn't really thought about that in the same kind of tactical and proactive way.
Great.
Yeah, you guys know that I suck at asking for the sale. So I've been getting coaching the whole time. But one thing that helped me in the process was, everything that Maddie said, but also when I'm making the ask, when I would get clear about how it benefits them, then it would be so much easier for me to ask. Because if I'm asking, hey, would you buy a lot of books, or would you pay me to speak because I really need to pay rent, and so this would be great if you could pay me. If I don't want to do that, right? But absent anything else, that's what I feel like I'm asking for. So, like when we started approaching, we've got these 4 different case studies. They're in different industries. We got a healthcare, we got banking, we got an association. We started going to healthcare associations saying, your members are like this case study. I bet they would like to hear how they're doing something differently, and I bet they're worried about attracting millennials. And they're like, yes, they are, and so suddenly you're doing them a favor when you're making the ask. So that's what's been helpful for me, is making that connection. How is it helping them or their customers, depending on who you're selling to? Makes it a lot easier to say, yeah, and you should buy 500 books and you should pay all this money to speak. So
that's great, Jamie. Yeah, really finding that one angle. For those of you listening, some of you have case studies, and that's easily to translate and to think about how that could apply to potential clients. But even just finding that one concept or one phrase and how it's relevant to an organization's goals and the challenges that they're facing can make all the difference. Okay, so in wrapping up, Maddie and Jamie, as you reflect back on this journey and what it's been like to, get this sophomore book out the door and not just launch this book, but to do the work to elevate your platform and grow your impact in a way that you can shift this conversation around culture. What advice do you have for the authors listening about how to prepare, or things that worked and didn't work that you would recommend? What piece of advice would you leave them with today? And Maddie, we'll start with you.
I think my advice would be to really have that kind of bigger goal in mind. I think it's very easy to get distracted by the weeds of all the different tactical things that go into writing and publishing and launching and marketing a book. But if you really have that forward pointing arrow towards the big goal that you have, it'll be easier to make those decisions that matter to that goal.
Great.
I don't know. I guess I would go back a little bit to the lean startup, which is my new theme right now, around the idea of being disciplined about getting validated learning. Part of writing a book is like, oh, I want to write this book, and it would be totally awesome if everyone would buy it and I'd become famous. Maybe that'll happen. And I think a lot of people go into it with that sort of approach, and if you just say, okay, seriously, which are the books that are the tops in the categories that I might look at? Who published them? What did they do? Who are these people? Let me get a little bit more learning about what's going on here. What do I need to do? And not be afraid to get an answer I don't like, but actually just say, then what does it take? Okay, you need to get these kinds of endorsements, then what do you need to do to get those kinds of endorsements? If you can't do them, if you can't do the work, maybe you should consider writing a different kind of book. Really be honest about getting data back from the market, from the real world, about what it is, because then you sort of can make those decisions that create the value as opposed to the ones that waste time. You can edit your book and make it sound perfect. And if you haven't done this other work, it doesn't matter. And so that's sort of the essence of this lean manufacturing. You do the things that matter. So constantly get the feedback, and don't be afraid with what you might find out.
Yeah, do the hard work, ask the right questions, and be willing to do something with the feedback you receive. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys, so much for joining me today for this conversation, and thanks to everyone listening. So Maddie and Jamie's book, again, is When Millennials Take Over. Love this. I'm so proud of them. I really am. I'm so proud of them and everything that they've accomplished so far, and it's really exciting to see the speaking engagements coming in and more opportunities coming their way. Book launches are often compared to the golf swing. The point of impact matters, but it's all about the follow-through, and these guys are in a great place to be able to follow through with a lot of opportunities and to be consistent and ubiquitous, and to share their message and impact their audience in a much bigger way. So encourage you to grab a copy of their book on Amazon, on Kindle or hardcover. It's a great model. It's important to look at models of other authors, just like Jamie said, to give you ideas for your book. So grab a copy. You can also check out their website at culturethatworks.net. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.